part of the module, which is on concepts. Concepts are something that is the underpinning of what you are creating in art. Whether it's a sculpture, whether it's a painting, whether you're using watercolor, oils, pastels, or just drawing, it's the concept that gives your work consistency and it keeps your technique under control. The concept can be one of several things. The concept in your work can be that of light, it can be that of color, and it can be that of composition. So in the case where the concept is light, you're dealing with the idea that light is the underpinning and it's going to be the consistent thing that you refer back to when you are floundering or when you're thinking about what it is that's tying your work together. If you think that the subject is the what, and if you think of the medium that you're using, whether it's being oil paint or watercolor, is the how, then the concept is the why of what you are doing. When it comes down to paintings, you choose your concept, and you should have that a mature artist keeps that concept at the back of their mind, and they use that to give their work strength. I'm going to give you a couple of ideas about different paintings that I've done, and I'll refer to what I've used as a concept pretty much in each one. And sometimes the concept can be a couple of things. So you might have the tone being the concept along with color. But essentially, if you refer back to the concept each time, you will have a uniformity and a consistency in your work, which otherwise, without a concept of which, it loses that strength. In the case of the portrait of Salvatore Zafraya, the concept here is light. It's the way the light hits the face, and it unifies not only the painting, the composition, but it gives the painting, for me, a strength and a purpose and an underlying narrative. So it's about this light hitting the face, very much in the way Caravaggio would have used light in his paintings, and there's a strong area of shadow and a strong area of light, so where the shadow on the face is close to the tone of the shadow of the background color and tone. So therefore, the light on the face gives it the drama, and it achieves why I wanted to do this portrait, was to give it a very, very strong feeling of light falling on the form. The light falling on the form of the face draws the eye and the viewer's eye directly to the face. So the viewer's eye goes first to the face, then it goes round to the hand, and then back up to the face. So when you have a concept underlying your work, the technique is honed, and you also are giving the viewer something that you're telling them where to look. You're not letting the viewer make their own decision necessarily. And a lot of the works of the great masters, you'll find that the artist has intentionally created and directed the viewer's eye to particular areas in the painting, and that's because they have a strong concept to start with. I suppose Night Watch is one that comes to mind with Rembrandt's work, and there's a host of different paintings that I can pinpoint to you, which I'll show you during the course of these modules, which I'll refer back to historical paintings, historical works by old masters, by the great masters, and that'll keep giving you the information to reinforce what I'm talking about here with concept of light. In this portrait, this is the portrait of Maria Venuti. This portrait has the concept underlying it, a couple of things. Composition was very important in this one, and colour ties it together. So in the sense of composition, I had to create a portrait where the subject had to be, of course, front and centre, although she's not front, she is front, but she's not necessarily centre, because that's the compositional part I've chosen to go with. And also I had to include, because of the subject's narrative, or the narrative underpinning this, I wanted to make sure that I included her background. So as a theatre performer, also as someone who had a television presence, and also who has a daughter, I wanted to include those elements of her personal life and her public life into the portrait. So for the composition, I needed the other elements to be having a sense of importance, and that your eye would follow through them, but also you would end up going back to the face of the subject. By keeping these compositional elements together tonally in the background, I direct the viewer to look at these little areas which have detail but not strong contrast or strong tone. By keeping the detail in the background but not strong in tone, they stay back. So the background tones are kept close together. Now whether the background tones are kept close together and they're light, or whether the background tones stay close together and they're dark, they will stay back. So you can have a light background or dark background. You can have lots of detail in the background, but as long as the tones stay close together, the values stay close together, they will remain in the background. And you keep the contrast in the foreground. So here you have the contrast. You've got the contrast, strong contrast in the face here. The colour and the detail is in the eyes and the lips. There's certain elements where the highest area of contrast is around this eye, so I direct the viewer's eye directly to her face, and then you pick up in the detail as you go around, possibly even to the hand, because that's where the next amount of colour and detail is, down to her costume, and then back up to her face again. So I'm directing the viewer by my use of composition and colour to where the viewer will look. There's the highest amount of contrast, colour and detail here. The next amount of colour is over here and a certain amount of detail, but there's lots of detail but not very much contrast in the background, nor very much colour. So that's the order in people, how you can actually make the viewer look to where you want them to look. The concept being composition is what I started with, which is the technique, and it gives it the underlying sense of how I want the end result to look. Working with thumbnail sketches in a composition is very important, so I work out on a small scale, maybe an A5 size, a postcard size picture, how I want the contrast and how I want the composition to look in a pencil sketch, and then I proceed on to a colour. This portrait is of Hugh Olivero. This portrait is a combination where the concept is of light and also of colour. As you can see, I was focused on having the light hitting this side of Hugh and also streaming into the room. So I wanted that to be the underlying concept for this particular portrait. And also I wanted the colour to be uniform. So I've put in blues and yellows all the way through, and even though Hugh was wearing a solid black garment, I injected a lot of the black with loads of blues. This particular narrative had to have all these elements in it, because when I did want to do a portrait of Hugh, when we started off speaking about it, he didn't particularly want to have his portrait done. He's rather objecting to me even doing a portrait of him. So I suggested that we do a portrait of him with his muse. And when I said, look, I'd really like to paint your muse, and he said, absolutely, you can paint my muse in it. And when I called upon suggesting that he bring his wife into the portrait, he objected vehemently and said, no, no, my muse is my baby grand piano. So hence, the portrait had to include his baby grand piano, and with all the reflections of his beautiful artwork, because Hugh is a ceramicist and a painter. So part of the narrative had to be his love of music, his love of the piano, but also to incorporate his beautiful ceramics. Hence, the ceramic vase in the background, the other tools and so on in the background are shown, and in the foreground, some beautiful large ceramics with their reflections into the side of the baby grand. This is where colour also comes into it, with the sense of giving it perspective. I had to deal with elements of the rear of the room, the back of the room, where there was a lot of light coming into the room, but there's loads of detail. If you go look closely at this vase, there's a lot of detail in the vase, but because I kept the tones of that vase very, very close together to that of the background, there's not much contrast in any of these elements in the background. The tones are very, very close together, so they stay in the background, even though there's lots of light there. If there was a lot more contrast, that would come forward. Similarly, this area here in the piano has got more contrast in it, so the piano is coming forward a bit more. And the reflection of this particular ceramic into the side of the piano also has a lot more contrast, so this area is coming forward. However, in saying that, the greatest amount of contrast and to demonstrate light in this particular portrait is shown on the portrait and on the body of Hugh himself. The black shirt, black garment he's wearing with a strong white on the edges means that this shoulder comes right forward, ahead of anything else in the background, and it demonstrates the light that's consistent coming through the window onto the side of his garment and onto the side of his face. So when I was squinting and creating this composition, I really wanted the strong light to be the concept behind this portrait and underpinning it, so that when any viewer comes to look at the portrait for the first time, your eye goes straight to his face and to his gaze, because the strongest contrast is in fact the greatest amount of detail, colour and contrast is in this area here. You've got the very dark hair against the very white highlights. You've got enough detail in the face, enough spots of colour to draw the viewer's eye to this point first, then down and around and out to the background. So another amount of strong contrast is in his watch. There's not much colour and there's hardly any detail here, but your eye does go up to his face, down to his crossed arms and out to engage and enjoy the detail in the background. Hugh, his stance, as different to the other portraits I've done, Hugh's stance was very confrontational because it was part of his expression. And that's something I always take into account when I'm creating a portrait. You've got to think that it has to be a collaboration between the sitter and the artist. It's not just you taking a note or creating a composition of a particular subject, but it's engaging, so it's a collaboration. In this case, Hugh really did want me to collaborate with him both on the background and the way he stood, his expression, and very much on what he chose to wear. So I had to deal with the fact that he wanted to wear all black and he was a man of colour. So that challenged me anyway, and rather than having a large area of just black, I've chosen to enliven the black by putting streaks of cobalt blue and ultramarine blue into it, therefore tying not only the garment to the background, where I'm introducing the blues, which are cool colours, but also they pick up in the cool colours of the ceramic, and also it complements the warm colours of the skin. And that's where composition is the concept and the colour behind this particular portrait.